Today on Judge Alex. She hired a private investigator to track her ex. But did this private eye get the job done?
I did a better job than she did.
Maybe you should start your own private investigator company.
No, I don't
Open
want
up
to
your own
start
company.
my
You
own
like it, you
private-
think you're good at it.
And she says she did most of the work by disguising herself and going undercover.
You were getting into this, weren't you?
We were very getting into it.
Well, she's into it. She's an investigator, but you
That's
were really
right.
getting
I
into
was
it.
into
Yes.
it very much.
Your Honor,
So.
she's not licensed by the state.
Yeah, but why are you letting her do the job?
She volunteered to go over there.
That's
I
right,
told her
license.
Now she wants to get paid.
I trusted her to pay the bill.
It's very clear to me. Both of you are very trusting, which is why you're here. Okay?
As a cop, he stood up for the law.
If I was the cop who showed up on the scene, you'd still be in jail.
As a trial lawyer, he fought for the truth.
Tell the truth or take a walk.
And as a criminal court judge, he commanded authority.
I've locked up people for less than what you did.
Now he has his own courtroom
This is my house.
where the cases are real
I will kick you both out if you don't follow my rules.
and justice rules.
I'm giving you one last warning.
Introducing Judge Alex. Private investigator Angie Fussell says she recorded surveillance video for the defendant during a child custody case. But the defendant is refusing to pay the bill. She's suing for $1,652 for PI services. Beverly Bermudez says she doesn't owe the plaintiff anything because she did most of the undercover work, and the plaintiff did a terrible job.
All rise. Court is now in session. Honorable Judge Alex Ferrer presiding.
Okay, thank you. Please be seated. Ms. Fussell, you're a private investigator.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you're suing your client, your former client, Ms. Bermudez, for $1,652 that you claim she owes you because you performed surveillance on her ex-husband or her husband?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, and she's not paying the bill.
Correct.
Okay. And Ms. Bermudez, you claim you don't owe her anything because she didn't do a good job. The information she got you is worthless, so you don't feel you owe her anything for the surveillance. Is that right?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, Ms. Fussell, tell me what happened.
Well, it started back in 2003. Mrs. Bermudez had hired me at that time. She was married, but she had suspected that her husband was having an affair. They were in the process of a divorce.
As far as that employment was concerned, did she pay you for that?
Yes.
She did. Okay. Completely?
Yes, there was. I did several surveillances for her over 2003.
So she would pay you in increments?
Right. And then she had a little bit of a balance left, and she did pay that in 2004 before we started the new, the new surveillance.
Okay. So now she approaches you for what purpose?
Well, she did not have custody of her kids, and so what she wanted me to do in 2004 was watch her husband and find out if he in fact was living where he stated he was living, and if the children were there living with him. She wanted to make sure that he and the children were not living with the girlfriend.
Was that your intention, Ms. Bermudez, to find out where the children were living and?
Right.
Okay.
To find out where they were staying at.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So what happened?
So there were two residences involved, okay? There was where her husband claimed he was staying with the children. Then there was the home of his girlfriend. So obviously I'm one person and I can't be watching two residences.
There were 3 residencies, Angie, not just 2.
Well, there was another one on the same street.
And what was your arrangement as far as compensation?
$50 an hour for surveillance plus mileage.
Okay.
That was the agreement.
All right. Now, how
Okay.
were you going to watch 2 separate streets?
Well, what I did was I asked her, I said, I'm going to have to hire another investigator. I'm going to have to subcontract with another PI. That's common in the
That's
PI
not
industry.
correct, Angie. You never discussed hiring another PI
Yes,
with
I
me
did.
at all. No,
Beverly.
ma'am, you did not.
Well,
Yes,
how did
I did.
look, discuss it or not discuss it? How did you expect she was going to watch both streets at the same time?
Well, whenever I first hired her, I was under the impression that she had enough personnel, employees that she was working with. And then later on, whenever I got the bill, I had found out that she didn't have any employees, and basically she was a one-person operation.
You agreed you were going to pay her $50
$50 an hour plus mileage. That
If
was
you
So
look
you-
at his report, he even communicated with her. He spoke with her. They met each other. And
I
I thought,
have never met the PI that you hired.
Ms.
I have
Bermudez.
never
You
set
spoke
eyes
to
on
him?
him.
And
Let
it's-
her finish, okay? I want to hear
Yes,
both
sir.
sides, not just
Yes,
your
sir.
side.
Yes, sir.
If
And
you-
her side with your spin. Let me hear both, okay?
if you read his report, He also did a statement of facts, notarized, and you've got it there, stating that he was hired by me to work on this case with Beverly,
Yeah,
and that
I
he
did
even
read that.
spoke to her, dealt with her. She even would tell him, okay, discontinue surveillance. So
That's not true.
if I didn't have permission to hire him, why did she communicate with him?
Okay. Now you've got 3 houses to watch. Did you think that if she collects $50 an hour and she puts 2 of her people on other houses to watch for you, they're just basically going to earn $15 a person while they're all tied up for the day
Well,
watching?
most of the minimum wage out there, most people have jobs $10 to $15 an hour anyway.
Yeah,
so
but she's
she
a
never
private
discussed
investigator. When
anything
you
being
go to your
additional to me.
doctor, you don't say, well, you know, most people out there minimum wage, they get paid this, so you know, I'll pay you $7.50 for that brief exam you did in
Well,
my
if it was
mouth.
gonna-
It's not the way it works. It's a matter of the business. She charges 50, and you know she charges 50. But why didn't you get this in writing? You're the business person. Why didn't you get her a contract with her in writing that says, you know, spells it out? It's $50 an hour. If I have to put a second investigator on the job, it's $50 an hour for that investigator. Why didn't you go to that
I had a
length?
contract, however, I did not get her to sign it because I did it all in good faith. We had worked together before.
Okay.
She paid it, so I trusted her to pay the bill.
I trusted her. Okay,
I trusted
got it.
her to pay her bill.
Got it.
So, and
Well, if trust is an issue, I trusted Angie to discuss any further additional costs that it was going to cost me because I would have never
It's
agreed
very
to
clear
do
to me.
this.
Both of you are very trusting, which is why you're here. Okay?
When Judge Alex returns, will her undercover work get her off the hook?
You're surveilling it how? You up in a tree with binoculars or what?
Sitting in a car that I had to borrow from a family member so my car wouldn't be spotted by my ex-husband.
Tinted windows?
No.
Well, that doesn't seem
no
very
tinted
good.
windows. You've got.
He drives by and
there's
goes,
called a
there's
thing
my
called-
ex-wife in a whatever.
Judge Alex continues as the defendant explains how she had to spy on her ex.
What happens during this investigation? You're surveilling one
right.
house. You've got somebody surveilling another house. How
Right.
is she involved in surveilling?
well, then she would call and say, do you want me to come out and help?
No,
and
I
I'd
did
say, if you want to, Beverly, that's up to you. There was no agreement saying
But
that.
how did she help? What did she do?
Well, she would like go to the school where, you know, where the
No, I
husband was.
watched one of the residents myself because you weren't there on one of the days, Angie.
Right, because I have other
you
cases.
you weren't there, so
have
I had
numerous
to actually
cases.
surveillance another property where my husband was supposedly
But
living.
just draw me
She
the, excuse me
volunteered.
a
So I
second. Draw,
worked.
draw me the picture here. You're surveilling it how? You up in a tree with binoculars
No,
or what?
sitting in a car that I had to borrow from a family member so my car wouldn't be spotted by my ex-husband. And so,
So you went
fortunately,
out and
we have
got,
to sit
you
there up
went out and
above
got the
the
dope
street.
car. You can hide in.
So, you know, you have to sit up the street away from eye contact, hopefully not to be spotted. And, you know,
Tinted windows?
No.
Well, that doesn't seem
no
very
tinted
good.
windows. You've got.
He drives by and
there's
goes,
called a
there's
thing
my
called-
ex-wife in a whatever.
It's called a baseball cap.
Baseball cap.
It's called a baseball cap and kind of shrinking a little bit lower than you are and so forth, and hopefully you don't get spotted. And I mean, I helped out on that one.
She's not licensed by the state.
Yeah, but why are you letting her do the job?
She volunteered to go over there.
That's
I
right,
told her-
licensed.
I
You're the
told
professional
her-
with a
It's a-
license.
you know-
I told her,
I
if
do
you
not
want to
have a
go
license.
over
Okay,
there,
enough.
that's your
Quiet.
business.
All right. Fine. I don't care. I don't care whether she's licensed or she's not licensed. I don't care if the two of you decided to become Cagney and Lacey and do this whole investigation together. It really doesn't matter. The bottom line is she's out there working one of the houses while the other investigator is working another house. And so one of you goes to a school where the children are?
On the other one, I was waiting at the school to watch the school to see if my ex-husband was dropping off the children at this certain school because he had removed them from another school. So we were trying
So
to
how
see
did
what
you guys
school that my
determine
child went to. I was sitting at the school and I saw my children sitting there and I called Angie and I told him he's at the school dropping off the children. So basically it was either her or the other person that she had employed outside of my agreement with her, and then that's how the case went.
Oh, yeah, no, stop.
And then we
Stop.
went to daycare one time. I had to impose as being expected mother.
Impose?
And, you know, act like I was an expected mother.
You posed as an expectant mother
Correct.
and went into a daycare?
With Angie, correct.
Were your children at the daycare?
My oldest daughter was at the daycare.
How old is she?
She's 11. And
Doesn't she recognize mom?
No, see how this happened was that one day Angie had seen the suspects, as she calls suspects. At that time, she saw her drop off an infant in her arms at a daycare. So she called me and we came up with a plan.
Thought it
Actually,
was
her
your
plan
younger
was,
child?
We thought that they had a child
Possibly.
together.
Oh, okay.
and we were
Possibly.
wondering if the infant was my ex-husband's. So then around 2 o'clock, 2:30 that day, we went in and posed. She posed as my sister. I posed as expecting a baby.
And
'Cause
how were you going to find out if this child was your ex-husband's?
the name roster on the rooms where the children are signed in
door.
at.
You were getting into this.
Yes, we
You
were
were-
very getting into it. And
well, she's into it. She's an investigator, but you
That's
were really
right.
getting
I
into
was
it.
into
Yes.
it very much so because
Yes.
I had,
And she kept saying she'd like to be a PI one day, and she even said, "I'll help you on cases to work down my bill, at no
That's
charge."
not true, Angie. I said- you were
so
saying
I
that you were
said,
short
no.
Let her finish.
personnel.
Let her
I said,
finish, Miss
I
Bermudez.
said, no, I need the cash for the time that I was out there and the time that the other investigator was out there.
Okay. So what happened when you gave her your bill?
She said she couldn't pay it because she was trying to get a new attorney, and she had to come up with all this extra money to try to get a new attorney because she was not happy with the other one. I kept saying, well, I'll work with you. Then she said, well, I've got some furniture or some jewelry. I
No,
said,
you asked
Beverly,
me that.
I
You
said,
asked me that.
No, she
You
offered
pay
furniture.
off your
You
bill with
asked
like a
me that.
futon or
No.
Yeah, I
here's
mean, it
here's a
was
couch.
And I said, no, Beverly, I don't need furniture. I don't need jewelry. I need the cash.
When Judge Alex returns, the judge keeps the defendant in line.
She called me up and she said, I had to hire this PI
Stop.
and so forth.
I realize I'm gonna have to keep you on a short leash now, so we'll just go where I
Yes,
want to go.
sir.
Okay.
Judge Alex continues in the case of private investigator Angie Fussell, who's suing Beverly Bermudez for $1,652 for PI services.
Why aren't you paying the bill?
Because basically my time that I took off from work and I did the work myself, I need to be credited back for, and that was what me and Angie had discussed.
That
And
was not the agreement,
Yes,
Your
it was,
Honor.
Angie. I don't
Let
get
her
up.
finish.
Your Honor, I don't get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go out and sit in the car. Getting up is really a hard thing for me to
Apparently you
do.
do.
And I did do it.
'Cause you did.
I did do it.
In
Yes,
this
you're
case,
right.
hour after hour, sitting there
Right.
for surveillance.
I did it.
Most of it, which is pretty boring, right?
It was very boring.
Yeah.
And both
I mean, that's
to be-
reality. When I was a police officer, I did surveillance. Most of it is just sitting there
Sitting
and
there doing nothing.
watching to see if something happens. And sometimes something happens and sometimes nothing happens. And
Correct.
it's extremely boring.
Correct.
But you obviously did it.
Yes, I did do
Okay.
it.
So what is your claim? I don't know her anything because I worked as hard as she did?
No, I had 4 days that I did surveillance work. She wasn't there on one of the days, so I had to basically make up for her not being there.
How much have you paid her?
I have paid her, and the whole total or just since then, I paid her $529.50.
Okay, let me break that down. At
Yes.
the beginning, there are two checks, $329 and $200.
Right.
And they're almost on the same day, right? Right
Right.
at the beginning. And your claim is the $200 was the deposit for
Right.
this job.
For the 2004.
Right, and the $329 was what she owed me
From
the
2000
last job
That's
we
correct.
did.
That's
And
correct.
your claim is what? What is the
The
$329?
$329 was not for any previous bill that was
What
done.
was it for?
That was to do part of this job to get the surveillance tapes and the reports. That was kind of initial thing for her to go to work for me.
Where
Who
does the
would you go if somebody owed you money? Why would you go and do more work for that person if they already owed you money? That does not make sense.
Where does the
You
well,
promised
that
to
might be
pay.
why she asked you to pay for it before she started this job. But
No,
where
the-
does wait,
And
wait.
she gave me
where
$200.
does the number $329 come
It
from?
came from, that's the number that she had given me, that
From
she
a
had
two-
wanted,
her
because see,
2000
she had to go get the tapes done. She had to have the tapes made someplace else. So the $329.50.
These are the tapes of the surveillance that she's going to conduct but has not yet conducted
No.
for you on this
Correct.
job.
No.
Because
Miss-
that was the fee of
Ms.
it.
Fussell,
That
stop
was-
talking.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
She called me up and she said, I had to hire this PI
Stop.
and so forth.
I realize I'm going to have to keep you on a short leash now, so we'll just go where I
Yes,
want to go.
sir.
Okay. Do you have the tapes? The surveillance tapes?
I have a tape at my office. She did not get the tape because of the fact that I had this large bill. She got
She
the
didn't pay you.
report. That's right. She
Right.
got the report. I was nice enough to give her and her attorney the report.
Okay, but you didn't give her the tapes because she didn't pay you.
Correct.
Okay, and your claim is I don't want to pay her anything because she didn't give me the tapes.
I paid her the money.
You feel you paid
in
her
the beginning.
everything.
I feel that I paid her anything and more because of my time. Excuse me, I have time invested in here too.
Your claim is, from what I'm gathering,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I went out there and I conducted a surveillance and I sat there for 10 hours.
Four surveillances.
So I should get $50 an hour for my time plus my mileage, subtract that from her bill.
Well, actually, it was less than $50 an hour, Your Honor.
Whatever.
And plus my mileage, yes. Because, my time and my mileage needs to be reimbursed also or be credited back onto the bill. She was not there on one of the surveillance at all the whole time. Then the second time,
she didn't get
I had
charged
to.
for that
What is this?
either.
Stop. What is this claim that you make that the information she gave you was useless? Why do you call it
Because
useless?
anytime when we were on a surveillance, anytime that I was on the surveillance with them, I had to. They lost the suspect. Angie would call me up on my cell phone. They've lost him. And I'm like, well, no, Angie, he's over here. So then they would have to run over there and start picking up the trail of it. I personally did a better job than she did. It was like.
Maybe you should
It
start your
was
own
like
private
a
investigator
wildcat chase.
company.
No, I
Now
don't
open
want
up
to
your own
start
company.
my own private thing.
Well, you
Obviously,
like it.
she was new.
You like it.
in
You
the
think you're good
business.
at it. Maybe
Well-
that's a new field to go into.
I don't know about that.
It doesn't sound like you're totally against it.
When Judge Alex returns, the judge makes his ruling.
Anything else you want to say? I'm giving you the opportunity because when I start ruling, I don't want to see the hand go up.
Judge Alex continues in the case of private investigator Angie Fussell, who says the defendant hired her to track down her ex-husband, but now the defendant refuses to pay.
Anything else you want to say? I'm giving you the opportunity because when I start ruling, I don't want to see the hand go up and I don't want to see you interrupting me. Okay?
Okay.
Anything else you want to say?
I just wanted to just reiterate, my time is just as important as her time is.
Okay. Anything else?
No, sir, Your Honor.
Anything else?
Yes.
Let me hear it.
I would say I want to talk some more. Obviously, I must have done a good job if she rehired me in 2004. Also, I did not have any agreement with her that when she was out volunteering her time that she would get a credit. That was not the deal. Also, she knew that another investigator had to be hired, and she spoke with him. She met him.
Yeah,
it's
she
in his
doesn't
report.
disagree.
met
Wait,
this-
stop.
I
She
never
doesn't
met your
disagree.
PI
Stop
class.
talking. She doesn't disagree with the fact that you hired someone else. So let's not go round and round,
Right.
okay? She just says it was your responsibility.
The other thing is, as a private investigator, we cannot guarantee that we are going to not lose the subject. That happens. The area where he was at, the traffic was
Y'all lost
horrible.
him all the time.
Lots of heavy traffic.
Okay, that's it. Enough. You can't collect for your time. If I go to my mechanic and I give him my engine to rebuild, okay, and I decide to sit next to him because I want to speed it up or because of whatever, and I start handing him bolts and screws and screwing things in, we each work 10 hours. That doesn't mean he gets zero. $50 an hour for his 10 hours and $50 an hour for my 10 hours. It's a wash. Thanks for rebuilding my engine. I go home happy. It doesn't work that way. The benefit that you get is you get a faster result. You get, in your case, more coverage. One house is being watched while another house is being watched. You get savings of her not having to hire somebody else to watch that third house or whatever savings you get. But you do not become a partner of her where she is paying you to surveil the house that she has no interest in surveilling except for you're hiring her to do it for money because that's what she does for a living. It doesn't work that way, okay? You've paid her nothing after you gave her those $250 and the initial deposit. I've looked at her bills. She's put in an awful lot of time. She'd be crazy to let you come into her job and conduct your own surveillance where every hour you work cancels out an hour that she works. That's not the way it works here, okay? So the bottom line is she performed her service, and hopefully you've learned to put everything in writing and to detail your contracts, but in this case, you owe her $1,652. Pay her.
All rise.
Angie Fussell has won her case, so the defendant must pay her $1,652.
I think the case went well. I won. It was her decision to come out and help me on a case. I was able to not hire another investigator, so we were able to cut her the cost. However, that was strictly on a voluntary basis, and we had no agreement that she would get credited services for her being out there. In fact, it kept her from having additional charges.
I think she's totally unprofessional and unfair. Doesn't even have a contract that anybody can sign. Like I said, I don't like getting up early in the morning, and it was pretty difficult. It was very boring, as the judge actually said. It did have some perks in it, adrenaline rush here and there, but basically pretty boring. So I've been remarried and happy and so forth. So everything looks good.